Yeah, we can jump it down by 30 seconds. All right, I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. This almost came off this time. Okay. And we'll start off with the roll call. McKee here. Schultz here. Berenkamp here. Nichols here. And Councilor Bottom is absent but excused. If you'd like to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Agenda approval. Is there anything from staff?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. There aren't any changes to the agenda that staff's recommending at this time. We do have a few additional or revised items that were on the dais and included in the City Council's House agenda packet. First being there's a minor revision to the park ordinance. The intent of the Parks and Trails Commission was to include cider to be an allowed alcoholic beverage to be consumed at the park. So there's a change on that. On 7D, on 10E, there's a offer letter that we put together following interviews. And so that's in front of council. And on 10F, we received some additional information from the applicant asking for a liquor license, temporary amendment, and a noise waiver. So those are the three items on your desk. So besides that, no changes to the agenda.
Okay. Anything from council? I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda with the revisions that Jessica just outlined.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, commission representatives, Jay's on from planning, I believe online, virtually, and then Tom from Parks and Trails is here. Go right into open forum. Jessica will walk us through that for in person or online.
Perfect. Anyone in the audience who wants to join us for open forum? Oh, sure. Approach the podium and you can state your name and address for the record.
Matt Fowl, 6315 Willow Drive. I just want to bring up a couple quick points. They're talking about building a big warehouse on Willow Drive. That's going to impact Willow immensely. A couple years ago, we worked on getting the blacktop pushed back on our road because it was going to be very expensive and we were paying for the whole thing, basically from Medina to use. And now that's no different, except for the stakes are even higher now. So the way I look at it, you guys probably got a couple different choices that you probably haven't thought of. One is to turn the road over to a county road, they'll pay for it. Or the other is to close it at the Corcoran Medina border, which I think would be actually pretty prudent. Just something for keeping options open. And the other quick note is the substation that they're talking about building up here. Talk about taking 5 acres of very valuable land. And when they were going to build this a little bit to the south, about a quarter mile or so to the south, they were only taking 2.5 acres of land max. Now they're talking about taking 5. And for what reason? We have to sit back and look at it and say, all right, what are they building that for? Is it for all these houses that are getting built down there? Because there's over 1,000 houses down there. And if that's the case, it should get pushed to the south a little bit, put it on the Westall Farm where they're building the houses, take a piece of that. Or if it's for all the infrastructure that's coming, then maybe it should be right up here on the city-owned property. Another thing to think about. That's it for now.
Appreciate it.
Anyone joining us virtually can press *9 or click reactions and raise your hand. Mayor, at this time, no one's raising their hand.
Okay. Sounds good. Then we will go into, we have 2 presentations today. First is Parks and Trails Commission Annual Report from Commissioner Anderson.
Mayor and council members, thank you for inviting me. It's really nice to be here. Jessica's put up a slide of some of the things that we've been doing this last year. I would just like to start by thanking Sharon Meister and Val Nigel, and Julie Strahler, and Phil Christensen, and John Dugan Alicia Hoffman, who got Parks and Trails Commission this last year. They are unselfish in giving their time and their efforts to Corcoran's Parks and Trails run well and be developed properly. And I think they're just a wonderful example of public service. John and Alicia have retired. The term ended and they spent time being a parent and are really busy, and they decided they just weren't going to continue. And so we'll get some new folks to fill in for them. Otherwise, Sharon and Val and Judy and Phil are all continuing. So I also know that I went back and looked, and my first meeting was in July of 2001. And back in those days, it was the Natural Resources Committee. And in that, we did our work from 2001 to 2004. And then we became Parks and Trails Commission. And so we've been going at this for 20 years. And we thought Corcoran would be a larger city by this time. It is not, but it is what it is. And our Parks and Trails plan has remained largely unchanged. I think the work that the Natural Resources Commission did, and we did in those early years, really stood the test of time well. It's a wonderful plan. And the finances get a little shakier as the cost of developing parks continues to go up, and the amount of money we can collect per house does not really keep pace with that. So, you know, we need to do the best we can to get the best park system that we've got. Just to kind of summarize, over this last year, we met only about half the time. We only had 4 different development projects that came before us, and that's what really generates our meetings oftentimes. And so I think we reviewed those effectively. A couple of them were very difficult, back and forth sort of operations, and we tried to provide good guidance to the council on what Parks and Trails ought to do there. I think that we have maintained wonderful communication with police and public works and the city council. We greatly appreciate the council members who come to our meetings and provide us with some guidance and then carry the message back to the council with things that we think are important. Our relations with the police are great. You know, parks are safe, parks are good, and we get to hear from Matt pretty often about what's going on, at least annually. And our relationships with Kevin and with Pat for the public works is great. We are very clearly all on the same page regarding how that should all work. A lot of cities divide their road crew and their parks crew, and we don't do that. And so far, we haven't needed to, because you guys they take good care of us. So we have no need to have a separate team doing that. You know, I just was going to mention, when we started in 2001, Denny Steeg was the chair of that committee. And then after he retired, then Chad Rogram was the chair of the Parks and Trails for many years. Trish Kruger took a good long stint, and Sharon Meister took care. So over 20 years, we've only had 5 different chairs. And I think that that's appropriate. This has not been a kingdom or a fiefdom with one person running the whole show, but we have taken turns, but we've had good longevity. And I think we bring that wisdom of experience as we go along. So I feel like the credibility of the Parks and Trails that the city council has for us, I think we deserve it. I really appreciate that what we ask for is highly regarded. It goes along. We're not fighting. We are very much on the same page. I think that's great to have that continue. This looks like it's going to be a really busy year. Just you can go to that next page. Priorities. All of these things are just really on our list. The Diamond Lake Trail, continue doing that. We've got Bellwether Open Space Park, City Park remaster. I have to say, it has been incredibly disappointing. Our progress in that has been so slow. It feels like we should have that first phase done, and we don't, and it won't even happen this year. But COVID got in the way. What can I say? So we are anxious to get that moving again. We park dedication fund, continue to work with that. What looked like a lot. Boy, we have $1.5 million in a park dedication fund. And that seemed like a huge amount of money. And these days, it hardly gets you anything. As soon as you start moving dirt, you know, you just all those commas and all those zeros in those monies. It can be pretty depressing. We're going to make some good progress on some park signage here. I think we heard a little bit about that at the work session tonight. The park signage really lets folks know that these are public parks and that everyone is invited to use them, and we will get that done this year. We continue to fine tune our memorial park. The garden this year will be better. The pollinator garden will be better, and we will continue to work to have just exactly the right arrangements of benches. We're also going to hoping to put up some educational sign at Wildflower Park. Some really nice native plants growing in there, although if you don't know what a native plant is, it can be really hard to pick them out. So we're going to try and do some nice signing there that will really enhance that park. And we're going to continue to work at making our park dedication what developers can expect from us in terms of what we need for our parks, trying to make that clear with some better instructions to folks coming in who need to put in the park. So I'm expecting a busy, I'm expecting a real year of good progress. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Any questions for Tom?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Tom. I just have a couple of questions. So you made a comment that park fees are not keeping pace with the cost of development of parks. So have we, maybe this is more of a question for staff, have we looked at redoing park dedication fees and recalculating those?
I'd have to check, but I'm fairly certain it was just last year that we updated them. So we do try to make it a practice to update annually. And again, remember, state law says your fees have to be based on your comprehensive plan. And we have a formula. So annually, we do go out and we talk to the assessor and we talk about land values. And we do the best we can with the land values, although they're always changing. And then we use the best available public data for the cost of improvements. So it's the best we can do. It's a snapshot in time. We did do it a year ago. We probably should, run the numbers this year again, but we did do it a year ago. So,
And Alan, I have to say that Kendra does her job. Absolutely. It's just that we looked at the cost of the total redevelopment of City Park. It's, I don't know, was it $20 million, $24 million? It was a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I understand big numbers, but I guess I'm also easily discouraged by them. So I think it was it probably was mostly an emotional reaction on my part. How are we going to pay for all this stuff?
No, yeah, and you raise a good point. It was one of the other things you talked about too, is I thought we developed the master plan phasing, and then so now we did more public input.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah.
Which I kind of wondered why we redid more public input after we've already had public input and developed the plan. So how has the phasing and plan changed? Has there been anything decided on
It
that?
has not. And what's another thing that slowed us up is we've been looking for some grant money, and we didn't get the grant. We're hoping to get it again, hoping to get some more this year. And we've had some other nice donations. So we've got a little more money, and we are hoping to make some good progress on phase one this summer, probably put out bids maybe in the fall. And so that a year from now, we will be just ready to put shovels as soon as it's possible to make some progress.
Good, thank you.
We also have a wonderful staff person, Jessica Christensen Buck is just marvelous. She has really stepped up. She's going to have an assistant. She's going to have somebody here part-time for the summer months to run the baseball, softball programs. So she is really looking forward to providing some big picture guidance for us. And I think that's something that we've been missing. When you have a group that's run by volunteers, it's hard for me and for the other commission members to know that how do you actually get something done. My wife would say that that's true about me in the household. Too. How do you actually dive in and actually get that stuff going? So Jessica is going to be able to take a little step back and not have to be out in ball fields all summer, and is actually going to be able to put some of these packages together and get some bids and really kind of move the stuff along. So, she is quite marvelous.
Well, thank you, and thank all the commission members.
Other questions, comments?
I think you raise a really good point, Tom, about it sounds like a sizable amount in the park fund. It's not as much as we would have hoped to do all the things that we want to do. I think another factor we should keep in mind is we live in country where for a long time inflation's been very low. That may no longer be the case, at least for a while. And so the purchasing power of the things we accumulated 5 years ago in different phases were being platted, it's not going to buy as much as it did. So we probably should be looking multiple years down the road for what projects we can get queued up and ready so that we don't have a huge amount sitting, losing value. And we get plans implemented on a regular cadence to use it as it comes in.
And, you know, when the Rockford School property became available, the city council and the city stepped right up and made that money. That did not come out of park funds. Because it needed to be done, and there weren't funds there at the time. And so the city has been really, I think, forward thinking in that sort of regard. We've also established a really nice relationship with Three River Parks. And I think that's paying off in a really wonderful trail that's towards the east side of town. There's talk of other developments, something going east-west, perhaps even a Three River Park in Corcoran. You know, I know nothing more than that. It's just kind of what's in the wind, but all of those I think are wins for Corcoran. So that is a wonderful trail system, wonderful park system. So it really enhances life. This is not a turf war. This is parks and trails people cooperating to get the best stuff done.
Thank you.
I got one question. Might be an advertisement, but in December, Parks got a significant contribution to one of our neighboring communities. What did we do to get that? What are we do? Do we do something for that neighboring community that they use our park, they use our ball fields, those kind of things, and it's above and beyond normal rentals, those kind of things? And how do we get more of that from our neighboring communities to just generously give us checks?
We get nice donations. We have a wonderful relationship with Lions.
Right. And I'm talking Hanover.
This was Hanover.
I mean, that was.
And they've run their program out of City Park for a long time. And
Okay.
they have gambling money, and they need to spend that money in an appropriate way. And we are an appropriate way to do that. So Jessica made the contact, and they actually asked how much would you like, and her ask was way low, and said you can do better than that.
She undershot.
She undershot.
All right,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, you should ask her for the story. She tells it. It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
It's a huge feather in the cap of parks and what you guys do, and thank you for all the years. So
And,
very
you know,
cool.
Our relationship with the JCs, and we'll do the tree giveaway again. That money comes from JCs, and they just step right up and start a relationship with our fraternal organizations. It's just pretty good.
It's cool what all of our volunteers, appointed volunteers and volunteers do for us as a city. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom. Okay, next up, Watershed, Ken.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me up. For the audience, my name is Ken Genthner. I'm the commissioner appointed to represent the city of Corcoran on the Elm Creek Watershed Management Commission. And what I'm doing is hoping to come up to the council 3 or 4 times this year and just give brief presentations addressing the scope of the watershed's activities, its involvement in the city of Corcoran, a few of those fundamental aspects. And so tonight, I was here a couple of months ago and just introduced the watershed generally. Tonight, I'm going to present our work plan for 2022, similar to what Tom just did with Parks and Trails. And then in the future, I'd like to talk about how the watershed is funded and acts as a conduit for grant opportunities, how it manages its budget, what that means to the member cities. And then finally, I'd like to do a presentation, a brief one on the actual studies that have been conducted in the city of Corcoran broadly and more specifically evaluating water quality in the city of Corcoran. So I included in your packet a 2022 work plan, and I actually edited out a lot of the commentary below the points because it's a dry document if you're not a surface water wonk, I guess is the best way to put it. But most people know the watershed via item number 1, which is the review that we do of all development applications. And so by joint powers agreements, all the cities in the watershed have banded together and created this body to act as a resource. And one of the things that it does is evaluate based on common and regulatory standards, the various development proposals within the watershed. And remember, the city governments themselves are still the regulatory bodies, the LGUs, local government units, that permit and oversee the projects. But in a sense, what's happening is all the cities have banded together and use the Watershed Commission as an advisory sort of body. So we review the applications, and then what you receive in your packet is the watershed's evaluation. And if the watershed, in evaluating the project based on those common standards, has recommendations or requirements, then you are the ones that presumably are adopting those requirements as you permit the project. So that's what you typically see. And that's probably, I would guess, maybe 50% of the time that the commission spends is reviewing the applications, because of course we're reviewing Maple Grove, Plymouth, Corcoran, Hanover, Rogers, Medina projects. So we have quite a few of those. Moving down, one of the other significant things that, and these items aren't presented in order of importance or time spent necessarily, it's just really a broad brush. But I want to focus on the ones that have more impact or potential to impact the city of Corcoran. One of the things that the watershed does is serves as a conduit for education. By law, one of our functions is to provide educational resources for communities and stakeholders within the watershed. So we are a member of the West Metro Water Alliance, which is several of the watersheds have banded together to do educational programs. And interestingly, Sharon Meister, who is the Watershed Commissioner, former, or Parks and Trails Commissioner, former chair, was actually an in-school educator presenting the, we call it WMWA, the acronym, the WMWA educational programs in grade schools in Plymouth, Maple Grove. And I unfortunately, I don't know if she's ever presented in the grade schools that are north and west of the high school, which would actually be in the Elm Creek watershed, but obviously that would affect Corcoran residents. So that's an educational program that the watershed, through its collaboration with the other watersheds, makes available to schools on water quality, ecology issues. Items 9 and 10 also speak to a couple of education programs in collaboration with other entities. The watershed helps sponsor resident workshops, and two examples are Lawns to Legumes, which is a program that actually was researched at the U of M, and it involves ways to help educate people to sow pollinator-friendly turf lawn. So it seems to be a little bit of an oxymoron that you could actually have pollinator-friendly turf lawns, but they have developed that at the U of M, and those opportunities are out there. So this is an example where the watershed's involved in trying to sort of create educational opportunities to help people find other ways that they can create an environmentally friendly lawns. And number 10 is the same thing. That's a program where the watershed's involved in promoting eco-friendly landscaping, rain gardens, and those types of things. And they provide workshops in those. One thing I wanted to mention and kind of build on what Tom said, it's interesting, and I hadn't remembered this, that back when we started doing the comp plan in about 96 or 7 or whatever it was, one of the required areas of attention was natural resources within the community. And the first sort of interest group or community focus groups were on natural resources, and it was a broader view. And then as the comprehensive plan came into focus and we actually adopted it, then we sort of narrowed it back down to parks and trails. But some of these programs are the types of things that actually, I think, could be presented to parks and trails, and maybe with the notion of expanding a little bit of the purview of the Parks and Trails group and bring it back to a natural resources group. And there are a lot of educational opportunities out there, and there are programs, there's grant funding available for people all across the community to engage in more sort of eco-friendly, water quality focused programs. It's just a matter of raising awareness of that. And like I said, these are sort of turnkey educational things. These could be presented to Parks and Trails and Natural Resources Group, and we could develop a little more interest in some of those programs. programs and an information base. And so that's just one thing to think about going forward. And again, obviously Sharon having her background in that area in Wimwa would be a natural liaison as a part of that. I shouldn't volunteer. I haven't talked to her. She would be good. I want to look at numbers 12 and 13. We collaborate with the extension agent via the U of M, who serves this area, and Hennepin County Environmental. And Chris Gensel came in the last time I was here, and we talked about some of the activities that they've undertaken in Corcoran, in particular, number 15 on the list, through the efforts of Hennepin County Environmental primarily. A large project was undertaken with private landowners on the west side of Jubert Lake. And this involved recreation of grassed waterways and detention basins. And as a result, the information that I received from Hennepin County is that annually 15 tons of sediment and 15 pounds of phosphorus will be retained and not flow through Lake Jubert into the rest of the watershed. And so this was a fairly focused project, and Lake Jubert's a significant resource that hasn't gotten a lot of attention in the community prior to this, but this was a collaboration between the county and the landowner primarily to adopt these changes, and they'll have a significant impact on water quality both in Corcoran and the entire watershed. Number 14 talks about the Commission's capital improvement program, and I want to actually talk about that in when I talk about the Commission's funding and budgeting and how it serves as a grant conduit. But one of the other major activities that the Commission does is help fund water quality projects within the watershed, and we have a formula for evaluating the programs and for funding the programs. And the Commission, based on its acceptance of proposals, then submits a request to the county to levy to fund these projects. So when everybody receives their tax statement, you go to the very bottom line, and it says other jurisdictions, and there's a number in there like $7. Well, one of those other jurisdictions is our contribution to the capital improvement projects that take place in the entire watershed. And typically these projects, the Commission will fund 25% of the projects, and the Commission looks for multiple partners in projects. They want to see more partners involved in funding the projects. Later on, and I think I'll talk about it at the next presentation when I talk about budget. I think you're all aware of the submission that the City of Corcoran made for capital improvement project. And that was tied a little bit perhaps into some of the discussion of the stormwater area charge. I don't know, Kevin, how much has been presented on that, or if I'm getting out ahead of the discussion.
I think it was about 3 years ago when we presented that plan. It's been in there for a while. So I don't know if all of the council members are familiar with that subwatershed assessment request. But we did recently approve a study.
So one of the things that we had talked about was doing a more detailed study of the subwatershed area in the south and eastern portion of Corcoran. We've already done a specific study of the north and west portion of Corcoran to determine water quality issues, specific sources of sediment and pollution that might arise in that area that causes, and what that does to help you prioritize areas for projects. We haven't done that in the southern and eastern part of Corcoran. The city did apply for grant funding 3 years ago, but of course the city has to fund its part of it too. So it has to appear on a priority list for the council and within the budget. And I think that'll be represented in the future, but there is some potential that if the city did undertake a stormwater area charge, that charge could contribute to fundings, not only the study, but some of the projects that might result as coming out of that study. The one last thing I want to mention, I think, and I'll leave it at that for tonight. Well, two things, but one thing specifically, the commission about 3 years ago undertook to update the FEMA flood maps within the watershed. And I don't know how familiar, a couple of people are familiar with that. Essentially, I think every 10 years, Kevin, I don't know how often FEMA requires an update. FEMA requires that the local jurisdictions update the maps of the floodplains with the community. And the DNR is actually charged with that responsibility, but the DNR essentially sort of subcontracted that out to the watershed, each of the watersheds to do their own. So Watershed engaged an engineering firm to model the floodplains within the city to update those maps. And where the maps become relevant is that they sort of established the engineering standards that would apply to city projects based on floodplain levels. So for example, the easiest example is how high do your road culverts have to be to accommodate floodplains in the area. And that's a real oversimplification of it, but it creates the data that you have to sort of comply with as you're doing public works projects. The other thing that I think is even more important is that any federally insured mortgage that involves a residence that's in floodplain or proximity to a floodplain, you're obligated to buy flood insurance to insure your mortgagee. And that involves a lot of people in the city of Corcoran. So one of the things, unfortunately, that we found out was, and the engineering firm uses a lot of technical mapping. It's not all feet on the ground out there, measuring water levels. They do a lot of technical mapping to do this. When we got the information back from the engineering firm, people like Kevin and his counterparts in Maple Grove and Plymouth quickly realized that the model didn't conform with actual projects that we've done where we've had exact data on floodplain levels for these projects. So we realized there was a disconnect there. And rather than send that information onto the DNR and have inaccurate maps adopted and then promulgated by FEMA, we decided to step back and essentially call for a redo. So unfortunately, it's going to involve more costs for the watershed and the community, but we're trying to correct those maps, send them back to the DNR, and then hopefully we'll have more credible data for both the cities and the homeowners within the community. The last thing I wanted to talk about is the Board of Soil and Water Resources, BOWSR is their acronym. They're required to evaluate Watershed Commission performance, and they've done that, and they've evaluated our performance. One thing that they've determined, they've audited us, I guess is a better way to put it, is that we need to improve our outreach, which means the commission needs to interact more directly with the city councils and more directly with the landowners within the watershed. So it's partly why I'm here, but on recommendation of BOWSR that we need to improve our interaction liaison with the council. So I think you'll be seeing and hearing more, seeing more of and hearing more about the Watershed Commission coming up. And the other thing that BOWSR has recommended is that we promote the SIP process more aggressively and make sure that the communities and stakeholders are aware of all of the grant opportunity and funding that exists out there to do water quality improvement projects. So I'm going to leave it at that. If you have any specific questions, I know you have a lot on the agenda tonight, so this is probably not where you want to spend your time, but.
Oh, this is great. And first of all, thank you. And we'd love to have you whenever you'd like to come out. I think it's valuable for the community. I know, before starting doing this, I didn't know much about the watershed, and I think it's valuable stuff to learn for the public that's watching or here. I did have one specific question that kind of not related to anything you went over today, Kevin. We were talking about the new requirements going into effect on the 1st regarding stormwater, and forgetting the name of those changes.
Yeah, they're just really the standards got adjusted with the new MS4 permit. So another item on consent is the MS4 ordinance that we required to do. So that the permit cycle got renewed. It had new standards. Some of those new standards elevated some of the requirements. The watershed is in the process of likely adopting those standards effective January 1st of 2023. And those standards impact the definition and how impervious is treated. I don't want to get too technical.
Right.
We talked internally about once that's set, doing some reach out to specific areas to make sure that anyone that is planning any type of redevelopment activity, that they're at least aware of that change, because it can be significant in some situations. So if anyone has questions on that, follow up with myself, and then we will be looking to distribute something here.
And my question, or maybe potential ask, is if the watershed ever does have some sort of, mailer or something that they're communicating out those changes to, if we could get a copy of that, because we definitely want to be reaching out to people in our community that will
Sure.
impact.
And actually interesting question, because the watershed just undertook a review of the various standards that the watershed applies, but also that the cities themselves apply for kind of an dull topic, but low foundation elevation above floodplain. So what we found out was that the various constituent cities actually had different standards when they permitted construction on height above floodplain for the lowest elevation on a foundation. And what happened was developers would be operating in multiple cities, and they'd be allowed to do something in one city and not allowed to do it in the other city. And then the watershed was getting sort of caught in between, and developers were having to come in and ask for variances. And we all know how popular variance requests are. So the first reaction to variance requests is, how can we iron out the standards so we don't have to have variance requests? So actually all of the city engineers, in the form of the technical advisory committee, Kevin and his peers, are the technical committee part of the watershed. They had a special meeting dedicated to determining what the common standard should be for low elevation above floodplain across all the cities in the watershed. And I think a letter might have come out. If you haven't received it yet, it will come out from the Watershed Commission to each one of the cities saying, here's what the common standard, here's what we recommend and believe in, this is what we will enforce as the common standard. If your ordinance isn't in sync with this, amend your ordinance, please. And if you don't, you better give us a pretty good argument on why you think it should be different. So there's an example, but I think Kevin and I, and presumably maybe Sharon or folks from Parks and Trails, will be looking for ways to increase the amount of educational resources, the outreach, all of that at all levels, council level, commission level, community member level.
Sounds great.
So,
Perfect. Anything else?
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Consent agenda, which consists of items 7A through 7J. Does anyone want to pull anything?
I have nothing.
Nothing? I think I'll pull, what's the number here? Just very briefly, but anything else? Hey, can I get a motion to approve consent agenda items 7A through H and J?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and then I just wanted to pull I. This kind of builds off the conversation we've had the last few meetings. I just wanted to point it out that this was actually recommended by the league. There was a model resolution just to kind of get on the record officially on some of the previous conversations we've had about maintaining local control for housing. So I just wanted to point that out for the record, and that was about it. I don't know if anyone has a question on it, but it's pretty straightforward, I think. Then can I get a motion to approve consent agenda item I?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Through consent. Moving on to planning business, we have a public comment opportunity for items 8A, B, C, and D, which is St. Therese landscape variance, the 2 PUD sketch plan reviews, and the final plat and PUD for Bellwether 7.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. Anyone who's joining us in person, if you haven't yet, you can submit a comment card. Opportunity or come to the podium. Otherwise, anyone joining us virtually can press *9 or the reactions buttons and click raise hand. And at this time, no one's raising their hand.
Okay. And we will wait a couple seconds while I find my page and Then go right into 8A, which is the St. Therese landscape variance. Kendra?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next slide, please. You know, the site directly south of us is the St. Therese project. Next slide. And in November, they were granted site plan approval and preliminary plat approval. As part of that discussion, we noted that they did not meet the landscape requirements, and they were given as a condition of approval, the condition stated that they either needed to comply or submit a variance request. And they have submitted a variance request to allow the equivalent of 181 trees on site where 259 trees are required. The Planning Commission did review this on February 3rd and voted 4-1 to recommend approval of the request. Again, this is 206 units. That's fine. You can stay there. That's fine. To the image. A single building with 206 units, a variety of housing care. And then on the southwest corner of the building there, you can see there's a future building area that does not have landscaping in it. And then there's about 4 acres north of the building, right at the south of the city center drive that does not have landscaping. Both are planned for future expansions with unknown dates, and that is part of the argument for the variance. Next slide. Again, equivalent trees, there was some confusion about this at the Planning Commission. I tried to clarify it in the report, but essentially you can use some understory trees to count towards overstory trees. And that's important because trees have different spacing requirements, and you can sometimes get understory trees where you couldn't get an overstory tree, which long-term have a larger root zone. So the city does have a high level of discretion with the variance. I won't go through this. You've got that in your packet. Next slide. The burden of proof is on the applicant to show that they meet the variance standards. And staff finds that the applicant does meet the variance standards for those reasons as outlined in the draft resolution. If the council, however, finds that the standards have not been met, they should recommend denial and direct staff to provide findings of fact at the next meeting. Next slide. We do recommend adoption of resolution 2212 approving the variance as recommended by the Planning Commission. And Mr. Mayor, the applicant is here.
Perfect. Sounds good. Any questions for Kendra or for the applicant?
So is the requirement, sorry,
No,
Mayor.
go ahead.
Is the requirement that the landscaping be in the perimeter of any development?
Could it be on the perimeter of the?
Yeah, I mean, is there any reason why they can't meet the standards by planning them around the perimeters of the future development? You know, on this parcel that borders the
Well,
boulevard or just south of the future building?
I think the applicant could speak to that. I mean, the argument in their narrative is that it would be temporary trees that would likely be removed when that future development happened.
But as far as our ordinance goes, there's no requirement that says the landscaping has to be around the perimeter of just the developed area.
Absolutely not. No, I mean, you can put them anywhere on site. So for example, there is that 4 acres on the north. They absolutely could plant the missing 25, whatever the number is.
Yeah.
71, wasn't it?
259 minus 181, 70 some trees
Yep.
up there.
Thank you.
Mike, if I may, Mr. Mayor, my question, I love this and such, but the thing that sticks in the back of my mind is, why isn't this plan encompassing those 4 acres? Why are they set for future development and stuff? Why isn't the whole space factored into this building, these buildings with the lower right-hand corner, I assume is for St. Therese, but the upper corner, the 4 acres, it's like, I bought 12, I'm gonna only develop 8, and then I'm gonna make a profit on those other 4. I might be speaking on the line. why isn't, say, trees encompass this whole property? They can meet the landscape requirements. There's no hardship, nothing related to, am I saying this right? That while you've got the corner in the southwest corner there for future expansion of the building and such. I just don't, I can't put my arms around why are we letting them reserve 4 acres on the north side when it could just be one big parcel taken care of and the landscape is done.
Can I ask a question off your point?
Please, I'm speaking openly. I just, again, I don't want to change any plans or anything. I just, if it's a hardship and that's future development, then is the ordinance set up for the 8 acres, or is it set up for the 14 or the 12 acres? Am I going right? Going
Yeah, I
right
think
out?
if I was gonna tail off your question is that if we allow a variance and leave these 2 spaces with no landscaping on them, if they come in the future to develop those, do they need to provide further landscaping?
Yes.
Or they would have to at that point? Okay.
Because again, the landscape ordinance, as we've discussed a couple times,
Yep.
probably should be updated. But how it's written is the, either the site perimeter calculation or the building square footage calculation. And it's the building square footage that's triggering the larger number of landscaping. And so when they add more building square footage, it's going to add more landscape requirement.
So is there a possibility that they would, if they didn't develop these now and we gave them a variance, that the future buildings would require less landscaping
Than the ordinance today?
than if we required them to put these trees on those parcels now?
I think anything's possible because I'm not sure where that landscape ordinance will land, but yes, that's entirely possible that the new ordinance could require fewer trees than the current ordinance, which is, I think, your goal with the downtown. So yes,
But if we kept the current ordinance as is, if there was no change to the current ordinance, and we didn't, if they were required to put these trees somewhere, is it possible that a future building on these sites would require less trees?
no, if they plant the 78 missing trees today, either in that southwest corner or the north,
Yeah,
that meets the landscape requirements for this building. Then in the future, when they do the addition in the southwest corner, they'll need to add more trees to the site. And when they do the addition in the north, they'll add more trees.
would they get credit for the trees that are there? or
No,
not?
because those trees were required for this building.
Oh, okay.
Is
So the answer is
is-
yes, then there would be less landscaping. If,
No, they wouldn't get credit for the trees that we make them put there today, as I
Right.
understand it. So
Is-
they'd still have to put more
okay, yeah,
landscaping in.
yep. I
Unless
thought
we
that
give them a
backwards.
variance at that point.
Right.
For the credit for what they've already planted.
Right.
So this came up when we reviewed the initial development proposal. And I think the crux of it, like we talked about, was the landscaping ordinance was developed with single-story structures in mind. And this is a 3 to 4 story structure. So you get a lot more floor area than the landscape ordinance was originally designed for per a particular building footprint. And when you combine that with the downtown area's character, where you're trying to have it more dense, we really should have a relief valve in the ordinance that allows money to go toward trees we would plant on city parkland or something like that. We definitely value the trees. We want that amenity in the city, but it doesn't make sense in the same way on this plat that it would in a residential or a commercial or industrial development where it's not multi-story like this. So I would still support the variant. I would have liked it better if there was some alternate vehicle where we could make use of that funding to achieve the actual outcome of having Corcoran be a greener and more forested place. But I definitely see a hardship given the requirements we're putting in place for build to line to the road and the intent that it's a more dense area.
I still, might be too much of a simpleton, but this landscape plan encompasses the whole parcel, correct? Or is it related to just the footprint of the building, not including the north 4 acres? Am I saying it right?
Well, it's sort of both, the way our code is
All right.
written. But the short answer, I would say, in simplest term, it's only encompassing this building. These landscape requirements are for this building, and any expansion will require additional landscaping.
But the calculations and stuff is based off the entire parcel of 14 acres
Based on
or
the building.
just the 8 acres that the building's on? So
So the code says you have to do two calculations. You have to do a calculation based on the perimeter of the 12 acres, and you get a number of trees required. Then you do a calculation based on the building area, and you get a number of trees required.
All
You
right.
take the greater of those two. So in this case, we did both.
it's based off the 12 acres.
The acreage of the site is not relevant to the number.
Okay,
But so in your calculation, is it based on the footprint size of the building or the total square footage of
Square
the building?
footage.
So you're penalized to have multiple story buildings.
Correct, that's the flaw.
No, I
in the
got it.
current
I'm
ordinance.
sorry. Thank you for spending that time. I'll back off. Thank you.
Good question.
Any way we can make that calculation simple,
Lots of ways.
so anybody like me can understand it.
There are a
Thank
lot
you.
of ways.
Well, I think the footprint square footage makes more sense to me than it does the total square footage of the
I
building.
agree.
Mr. Mayor.
Right ahead.
Council members, if I may, Calvin Chongowski, on behalf of the applicant and CFO for St. Therese. What's really driving the quantities here is the total square footage. So density is really working against us. And really, the reason why the big open space was created, to answer the question, the maximum setback rather than minimum setback, we pulled a lot. We've made some changes really to meet the intent of the Southeast District and the town center, and intent of design. So that's what created that bigger open space. And we really do appreciate the consideration throughout this evening and with the planning commission. And this really is going to be a beautiful site. We have a long list of residents that are very anxious for this site and excited at it.
If I can, I didn't want to make you nervous. I'm trying to get my hands around it, and that whole overall square footage compared to footprint is what's got me messed up. So still like the design, like the start of our downtown. Very cool.
Did you have anything else?
Thank you.
Any questions?
Is there flexibility on the request of the variance, the number of trees? Or is it, it is what it is and that's what we have?
Well, couldn't we condition planting of some to mitigate?
Yeah, you can, as part of the ordinance, you can attach conditions to address the impact of the variance. And while I generally, the attorneys have generally told us not to negotiate variances, in this case, there may be some ability to talk about a certain threshold for the variance. If that's what you mean, like a different number, instead of 181, we'd approve.
Yeah, I was just thinking the southern future building site, in my mind, could use landscaping along the future street to screen the building from the south. Because there's not much landscaping along the southern portion of the building that juts to the, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I would agree.
Yeah, we'll have the street trees. I think, just the acknowledgement that those are temporary, given the size of the site, they will likely all be removed when that construction happens. It's just difficult to work around those tree root systems with the kind of construction that needs to occur. But, Calvin could speak to that a little bit in terms of timing, how long that might be there. But you certainly could, I think, make that condition.
Yeah, we typically reserve areas for our phase 2, and we've developed anywhere between 1 year and 6 years after the phase 1 development. So after the first phase gets established and occupied, we typically move and we'll start at pre-sales. It's a smaller portion. That building would maybe 35 to 45 apartments total, so it wouldn't take long to pre-sell the units before we move into phase two, but it would be based off of market absorption. There are some other limitations. I mean, we are required to pull the building to the street. That's part of the kind of the, the downtown or the town center intent. So we want to pull it close to the street, which we would most likely remove those trees if they are planted, which is why we didn't put them there in the first place.
Thank you.
You think it's 1 year, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
On landscape.
Yeah, I mean. Personally, I think I'm more fine with the variance, knowing that our code is, to me, is skewed with the amount of square footage, total square footage versus footprint square footage.
Right.
Otherwise, I would be more inclined to disagree with the hardship. But I think we just, I think we need to readdress our ordinance with regards to square footage wise.
Yeah, I think there's a few other things that we touched on earlier that we'd want to add in to that code.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page.
I like that it's square footage rather than footprint, but I agree there should be an outlet in the downtown area that allows us to use that someplace where there's more room to accommodate it.
Mhm. Yeah, like one of the ways we were talking about earlier with either a fund or offsite planting. Right. Yeah, those are all stuff we'll have to look at in the code going forward. But for this one, I think it does, to me, meet the requirements for the variance. And it overall is a well landscaped site. So I think I'm comfortable with it, but any other big things you guys wanted to discuss on it? Otherwise, I will go ahead and entertain a motion to approve resolution 2022-12 approving the variance.
So moved.
Some second.
Any further discussion?
Thank you for the discussion and some clarity around it.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, making you a little nervous there.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. On to 8B, which is the PUD sketch plan for Corcoran Farms Business Park.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the 70-acre site directly west of our downtown. And for those of you who are involved in the comprehensive plan, you may remember that we actually re-guided this property from residential to industrial to expand our industrial base in Corcoran. Next slide. It's bounded, I should have said, by 50 on the north and Larkin on the south. And the applicant is proposing a 5-lot industrial subdivision on the screen. It's a little hard to see the red line on the right. That is the edge of the shoreland overlay district. There's a creek that runs along the east lot line, and that boundary is the shoreland overlay district. There are some limitations within that overlay district related to impervious surface that are more restrictive than our general industrial impervious surface, so it's important to know that. The entrance to the site is off of Larkin. There's a new public street proposed that will end on this site and then extend ultimately north to 50 across from the park entrance. And the challenges of this site with the wetlands, the proposal right now shows that as the only public street access. The applicant is showing a driveway on the north off of 50, and staff has noted a number of concerns about that. We are not comfortable with a driveway that winds through a parking lot, especially a parking lot of that size that could be used for cut-through traffic. And so we would recommend that that be closed and serve as an emergency vehicle access. We also suggest that if this moves forward, look at the potential for the extension of a street from the east over that city-owned property.
Which one is that? Can you point that out?
It's the south of Treptow. So if you know where that city-owned property. So it stops short of this property, so it stops right about there, I
Okay.
believe, right?
So there's private property between our property and theirs. Okay,
Yes.
that's why I couldn't find it.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And I'd lastly, before we move to discussion, I'd like to point out the gas line easement, Jessica, if you can just, that gas line easement does restrict the site, obviously, that you cannot have encroachments into that. Crossings are limited to perpendicular crossings, so there are some challenges with this site, as you can see, between the wetlands and the other odd shapes. Next slide. This is over 700,000 square feet. It would trigger an environmental assessment worksheet in EAW. The property is guided and zoned light industrial. As I mentioned, it's in both the shoreline and the wetland overlay district. The proposal as it's drafted is for a 10% office, 90% warehouse distribution. And I want to point that out because it was in the staff report, but it might get lost. The narrative talks about an 80-20 mix, but they can't meet the parking requirements for an 80-20 mix except on buildings A and B. So it's really a warehouse type facility, given the mix that the parking, and there's a table in your staff report. So I want to point that out. Also, there's a trail on the east. This is potentially part of the Diamond Lake Trail corridor, the Three Rivers corridor. They do show that on their plans, the 10-foot trail, but they do not show the 20-foot easement, and there is not room on the current plans for the 20-foot easement on the southern part, so they're going to need to make some adjustments down there to comply with that. They are requesting a PUD and specifically mentioned a PUD for setbacks along the public streets. Reduce setbacks on Larkin and reduce setbacks on the new public street that I talked about. Next slide. I think there are probably a couple of others that I highlighted in the report, so I want to talk about those a little bit. The flexibility from Larkin, based on this plan, is a 20-foot setback where 50 feet is required. We did have a discussion a couple years ago about redoing the light industrial standards and reducing the setback, and the Planning Commission recommended keeping the 50-foot setback as the council. So I really want, for the applicant some discussion about the setback that's requested. The 20-foot setback is based on the existing right-of-way, and that's what we know today. I just want to acknowledge we have not completed our feasibility study or our EAW. It is possible that that could shrink in some areas if turn lanes are required and more right-of-way is required. So the restrictions are somewhat due to that gas line, and the need for a functional warehouse building it is a fairly typical warehouse building there. So I just want to acknowledge that. They're also asking for flexibility from the front yard setback from the new public street for a 20-foot setback of 50 feet is required. However, the staff review notes that the plans show a 60-foot right-of-way, and the city engineer is recommending an 80-foot right-of-way for that new public street. That would reduce the setback from 20 feet that they're suggesting to a 10-foot setback. Both of those setbacks along Larkin and this street are related to the parking. The building does meet the setback. This is parking and drive aisle setbacks. Their application did not request an impervious surface coverage variance, which is allowed surface coverage of 70% per lot. There's a couple lots that look pretty close, so thoughts on that probably would be warranted. Landscaping, they said they did not need a variance from this, but they are required to provide 726 overstory trees and 2,000 shrubs. So I'm skeptical. I'm pretty sure they'll need a variance or PUD flexibility, I should say, pardon me, simply because there's such limited landscape area.
Or we change the code by then.
Well, single story.
True.
Yeah, what is the driver for this particular application for the total number? Is it site perimeter?
This one is building square footage as well.
Okay.
And lastly, they are requesting 60-foot curb cuts on our public streets. We've had this request before. Staff strongly recommends against varying from our maximum curb cut standards in our design guidelines. And we have not allowed larger curb cuts elsewhere. Not requested specifically, but it is going to be part of their application potentially, so I wanted to call it out. Next slide. So we've had a ton of conversation lately about PUDs. So really, I think there's really two big questions. Do you support the sketch plan concept? Just in general, when you look at it, does it feel like the right project on this site? If yes, and you support the flexibility that's needed to accomplish that site plan, how would you like them to move forward? A variance has to show practical difficulty. We've just been through a variance that's difficult to meet. A PUD needs to show compliance with the intent of the district. And what flexibility would the council support, and what public benefit would you want to see in return? The purpose of the sketch plan is to get feedback from the council fairly quickly, fairly inexpensively, before the developer spends a lot of money. And so really, we hope that tonight we can get some feedback, and staff, I think, wants to hear what is important to the council as we get requests from landowners for what the council is looking for, where flexibility would be considered and where it wouldn't. And if the council supports the project and it moves forward, the next step would be an environmental assessment worksheet. They have submitted the financial obligations, the escrow, to get that started. But we felt like, given the discussions about the PUD, we really needed to get here before we really started that in earnest and made sure that they still have a project. So the next slide is just, this is a concept plan or a sketch plan. The intent is to provide the applicant with informal comments so that they can decide how to proceed with the project. It is advisory only and non-binding, but really important for both the applicant and staff to understand the council's feelings about the requested flexibility and specifically the PUD process.
Perfect. Thank you. Can you go back to the key issues? I think it's 2 slides back. Just leave that up there for conversation.
more.
This one, or
The one before it. Yeah, that one. The other one I have this.
It's like, if there's a weight restriction over that gas line.
I don't know that.
Over that, so.
I'm not sure, to be honest.
I don't know that either.
We can look into that. I'm not sure off the top of my head, though.
I would just say the owner of that easement would provide that information. So they'd have to address that to get the approvals to cross it.
Gotcha. Just very broadly, I think the project makes sense there for, given the zoning and guiding. I think in terms of how to get there with some of the requested flexibility, I would say PUD. I think a lot of the concerns I have and the council's had with PUDs is more applicable to residential PUDs. I don't know, maybe it's just lack of, we haven't had many non-residential PUDs, but it doesn't seem to have doesn't seem to present the same issues that we've been seeing. So I'd be fine with it coming in as a PUD to get some of this flexibility. And I think that gives us other avenues to, try to offset some of the impact of certain flexibility. But certainly I'd love to hear what you guys think.
I guess I would have concern with setback along Larkin Road as it abuts in a residential development to the south. So that, and then there's a couple residents along the west too.
Yeah.
That would be probably one of my primary concerns.
Yep, I agree. Because which setback was it? Kendra, you're saying effectively gets down to 10?
Internally along that new
Okay.
public street.
Gotcha. Internally is not
Yeah,
as
no,
much of a concern to me, but the houses to the south, some kind of scattered along the south, and there's 2, I believe, to the southwest there.
yeah, so they're looking for 20-foot setbacks along Larkin from the parking area, correct?
I believe so.
Correct.
And then the you talked about if the road right of way in the internal street was 80 feet, the setback on parking would be 10 feet.
Correct.
Would that include 10 feet on the west side of those buildings too then? Does that whole building shift over or?
Well, I mean, I think I don't think that the building necessarily, I don't know that they have that building on the west side dimensioned for the setback, and I can't remember when I dimensioned it, what it is. The applicant's team is here and could maybe tell you that. It probably shouldn't have to shift. It looks like the drive aisle.
Because that's, what is that, 100 or it's a 20-foot required setback? for
It's a
side?
50-foot required setback from that new public street.
No, I guess, yeah, but for the, if I'm looking at, I think it's building A, which is the
Yep.
southwest building. There's parking along the west side of that building. How close does that building come to the property line and how close does the parking area come to the property line to the west?
Yeah, the
Building A.
Yeah.
parking drive aisle, I believe is 10 feet. I'm not sure what the building dimension setback is. There's not a lot of dimensions on this plan at the concept plan stage, but the applicant, Tom and Jeff might know the setback.
So my concern is here
Yes, yep.
and then here.
I think we're saying from what, building A?
No, it's building E.
Oh, okay.
I think it goes A, B.
Oh, yeah, I
CD.
just saw A and assumed that was building A. You,
So
okay,
you need
makes
one,
sense.
you need one of these.
There you go.
Yeah, pass that down, right?
It's a Dorothy Tyson. right there.
But yeah, those are the ones that I'm concerned about too, because that's pretty tight. Both those west and southwest sides there.
Yeah, I mean, personally, a lot of the concerns we hear about from residents has to do with, encroachment on existing developments and how do you mitigate that? And,
Mhm.
we're gonna have berms and fencing and whatnot for lights, but still,
Yeah, it's very
Balancing that.
close. It does comply. There is some screening, as I noted, that needs to happen from loading docks, and I'm very concerned about the ability to do that on that west property line. I question the ability to provide the screening from the homes on the west.
Mhm. Yeah, and it'd be very difficult to do any sort of planting, I would imagine, on such a narrow
Exactly.
strip there.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I'm all about a good neighbor. I've said it numerous times and such. I think the PUD sketch plan and such is what we're talking about right now. I think it's a good thing. My other concerns to think about is what happens to Larkin and 116, that intersection. It's already not well aligned. The proposed right hennepin site and such, I just, what happens at that intersection? This much property, this much industrial. All of those traffic is at a controlled light. Again, we're at the mercy of the county and those kind of things. Those are things I'm thinking. And then again, the good neighbor side, the screening to the residents to the west, all the way up and down here, and obviously on the other side of Larkin are the biggest concerns. Otherwise, this would encapsulate the furthest west portion of our industrial identified property, right?
Correct.
That's my general. I mean, we're talking very general. The meat and potatoes will come down the road, but
And Mr. Mayor, I should have clarified with the EAW effort, if that goes forward, it does include a feasibility study that will include the traffic study.
Good deal.
thank you.
That'll be important to know.
So my feedback, I really like the opportunity to extend that Three Rivers Park District Diamond Lake Regional Trail that would come if this project goes forward. I think that'll be a major benefit to the city, especially if we can connect it to the trail segment that'll be part of Tavera. It'll be really good to get a multi-mile section of trail network built out. So I view that as a positive. I also like the alignment of the stormwater ponds along that corridor. I think that'll make it a more pleasant experience for people who use that system. I would agree with what Councillor Schultz expressed about needing to see good screening to the south and the west, in line with what code would require. I would be okay with flexibility on the internal streets, but not external to the site. That's how I would look at that. In terms of the curb cuts, I'd like to better understand what the rationale for 60 feet would be. I think on whole, we like to keep them narrower so that it's a more defined area for cross traffic. I would default to the 30, but I'm willing to have a discussion about why 60 would make sense. I would agree with Mayor McKee regarding the path forward. I think a PUD is probably acceptable, but I would be okay with a variance as well, given the gas pipeline. In terms of the question about what benefits we could see for a project like this, we haven't talked a lot about PUD benefits and our philosophy as the council yet. I'll throw a few things out onto the table that might be applicable to an industrial type site. I think improved screening and landscaping by the trail beyond what code requires would be a benefit. I think the same along residential borders to the south and the west would also be a benefit. An increased level of park dedication would be a benefit. And upgraded exteriors, especially where the buildings face residential areas, would also be a benefit. And I had the same question as Councilor Camp about what this would do to traffic on Markham.
We just have to see the numbers before we can really.
I feel like there's definitely a version of this that makes sense and would be approvable. I feel like it might be a little bit overly dense, overly built out with the current proposal. But I think it's certainly possible to get to something that would be a very good fit.
I would agree. I think kind of the stuff that we've already hit on that are going to be the sticking points, relatively the really tiny setbacks for both the southwest properties and along Larkin there is the tricky part to me. You know, is there probably some middle ground between 50 and what's being shown here, some, you know, the 10 or 20, probably with some even more heightened level of landscaping. But I think as it is right now, I could be wrong, but it seems really tight to be able to screen it how we'd like it, how we need it to be for the surrounding properties there. But I do think that's something I think the site can work in some form for sure.
Is the applicant here? Can
Hold back, row it.
can I ask you, are these buildings that are going to be leased or sold in like full units, or are they subdivided to smaller units for users? Or yes,
That'd be great.
please.
Yes, answer the question. Members of the council, Mr. Mayor, the buildings would start with, would be building B, which would be a multi-tenant building. We also have, but we would have a variety of approaches for this project. We actually have the ability to sell land to end users, corporations that would want sites for a building as well. So in all cases, we'd be kind of building to suit for either addressing what the market is needing, which we could build. All of the buildings could really be multi-tenant and offering them only for lease. But the market's less than 4% vacant, so that's super strong. But we also have a very large amount of tenants that would like to own real estate and would like to convert to that type of method. So we can really do either one, and we're actually going to approach the project to do both so that we can probably accelerate our process and make it as successful as possible, as soon as possible.
So do you look at this as the final end product to look similar to this with 5 buildings, or could this be radically different than what we're seeing today?
No, I think, you know, we first of all have the curtailment with the pipeline so that it really started to make the project and also the street itself. The alignment with Blue Bonnet creates that north-south line as well. So we start to get the pieces started to fall into place just by virtue of that. So we really had a limited amount of design elements that we could do. So really what we've done is studied it very hard and we don't see really a whole lot of change to this. This is trying to maximize what is there for land that is buildable. And so I don't see this varying a whole lot. I mean, we are flexible as well in terms of trying to fine tune this so that the site does fit for the city as well. But for the most part, we don't see these buildings changing in alignment.
And then you've got loading docks on all the buildings. Am I thinking of like large loading dock areas where there's door after door after door after door, and we're gonna see trailers backed up to every one of them? Or are they, you know what I mean? Is it gonna be more of a warehouse look to it, or is it gonna be more of, you've got build to suit different things, and you might have one part of the building's got 4 loading docks and the next guy's only got 1 loading dock? And
Right.
are we gonna see a ton of semi trailers sitting everywhere? I mean, let me try to envision what it might look like.
It's a good question. The buildings, probably the one thing I can't do with these buildings, I can't really design a big parking yard for trailers. So really all we have room for is dock berths against the building itself. And really that back surface area is really all we have. So to the extent that people need docks, they're going to use them during their operations, and then they're going to be gone. The trucks will come in and come out. But and they could set one in that berth as well overnight, things like that. But for the most part, it's not a heavy distribution center. The north building is much more designed for a heavy distribution center. However, again, it doesn't have extra truck trailer parking or anything like that. But the types of buildings that they are kind of answer that question. So buildings A and B have a more narrow depth to them, a shorter depth. And that particular tenant will not be heavy warehousing, heavy shipping type tenant. They're going to be more of a 20,000 square foot tenant with 3,000 feet of office space. So those buildings will probably be lighter shipping. Building C is a deeper building from front to back, and it has more of a conventional loading. So we see that as being a lighter percentage of office to the total, and that could be a little heavier truck activity. But again, it backs up to the other building, so it's going to screen itself from the other building pretty well from the streets around it. That's your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you have any comments on the feedback that you've heard that you want to?
Yes. I appreciate the opportunity to come out tonight and appreciate your time to see this opportunity. We're super excited about this. We've been working on it since last summer, and we've done a lot of research. All of the homework has really been done in terms of what our understanding our costs and designing this project. So we really feel like we're kind of at the launching pad stage where we really want to get started. But we know we have to go through some more steps here, obviously, with the AWs and things like that. But we just, I think I'm really excited for the city, in terms of what this would be as in comparison to where the city has been so far. I mean, it's a big leap forward with some very high quality industrial real estate that's going to look outstanding. We will design the buildings to be very attractive, and I just think it's going to be a great project that will attract more credibility, more just everything. Put the city in a bigger place with all the other cities that are to the east and north. I think the cities to the west of you are going to be envious for years to come until they have their sewer and water in their day. But I think it will be a great new start for the city, and we're excited because of that. Beyond that, I think we just want to mention that in my background is 38 years in commercial real estate, all industrial real estate. And I have developed about a half dozen projects over my career, some for my own account. And I just want you to know that my expertise spans not only a development background, but it also is principally seated in helping businesses with their real estate, and it's all industrial. So having that viewpoint of what a piece of real estate for industrial needs to be built like, that's something that's just second nature for me. And I think that's where, what I'm bringing to this process, I think is as most practical design as we can bring, and also with the idea that aesthetic is highly important, and that we would be able to address some of your concerns about some of these setbacks, and also to, to get the softening of the front yards of those buildings as much as possible, and make sure that it's something that you're happy with. So to that point, I would just address specifically along Larkin Road, where it sounds like the greatest concern is that that's probably where we need the variance the most. And that the reason for that is when you take the 20 feet and you put the parking lot there, and then you put the building depth at 160 feet, we have 120 feet left for the loading. And we really need 120 feet for loading. And we really need about 160 feet as a minimum depth for a building. The minute we start to go shallower than that, we end up getting a building that's going to be much, it's not going to be an industrial tenant anymore. It's probably going to be a biotech or a high tech or somebody like that that's going to need a lot of parking, and it's going to be a different type of tenant. And there's a lot fewer of those in the marketplace. That's probably would, it's just not a part of the market that we want to build to. And part of the reason for that is it's a high percentage of finish. It's very expensive to build as an owner. And the capital markets, they don't pay as much for a building like that. They discount. So it's just not a good piece of real estate to build. So what we really want to do is try to have something that's highly marketable, and it's the minimum depth that I think we can allow to attract the tenants that we want to attract. So that's the reason for that. And it's that pipeline that sits there that causes us to have that issue. So other than that, we would screen it as best we could with landscaping in the front yard, but we could also put some things in the parking lot itself in terms of trees. And I think we could maybe even potentially put some trees up against the building if that would help soften the front. So
Yeah, I'd say, as creative as we can get with those type of things would go a long way and help.
Are we going to be limited in landscaping because there's a high power line that runs on that north side of Larkin?
Underneath that, we are, yes.
So we can't put any type of trees in there. We can really only put probably shrubs.
Well, we'll have to see exactly where that should be on the right of way line. So it should be behind that the trees are. I think we'll be careful about that. Again, another reason why having it narrow makes it challenging to landscape. We don't have enough room for a berm there. I just think I've heard a lot from the council about screening and buffering and landscaping, not only on this project tonight, but in previous projects. So I think the clearer you can be about what your expectation is. Along the west, there's a 10-foot parking setback and a 50-foot building setback. And so if you have a different expectation there, it'd be really helpful for the applicant to hear that tonight, as well as sort of some of those expectations along the front. Because you're right, I think that overhead line is going to limit it as well on the Larkin side.
It does make it trickier.
So is there any thought process about changing the way loading docks come in, instead of having trucks back into a bay, come in parallel to the building?
Like a sawtooth?
Yeah, and shortening that up so you can push the building back further.
yeah, there's a possibility to do so. However, you can only get one of those truck berths probably for every 10 to 12,000 square feet. So you're having just a small percentage of docks, and you start to really limit what it is. Most tenants, where they have that and encounter that in the marketplace, they really don't like it. They'll tend to shy away from going into the building, because after the truck pulls into the berth, there's an angle going back, and so their product can't even come straight in. It has to kind of turn.
Yeah.
And so if they have anything long, it's hard to get it around the corner. It becomes just a compromise. So it's highly undesirable, and so certainly we want to try to stay away from that.
Yeah, and I imagine your plan hinges on too, is that trucks coming in off Blue Bonnet behind the building and leaving from that same area, right? Instead of going around the building, or, having another access over the gas line to come out from the building to the north.
we can drive across the gas line, but really what we're trying to do, we've designed so far is that the trucks would come in that main road, the new road, and go in and out and back out again. So yeah, to your point, it all kind of comes back to where it started from. But we were originally requesting a couple of curb cuts along Larkin to maybe help alleviate some traffic, but I'm not sure if the engineering from the city said that it was not enough distance or not. They were not desiring to have any extra curb cuts, but that's a point we can always talk about, but try to design it so that if we can't have it, we've got a way to do it.
Yeah. I think the power line thing that you mentioned could make it tricky. Like I said, if we can get creative and find a good way to get some screening in there to that southwest and along Larkin, then I think we can, there's a solution to be found. If not, then maybe it would have to look at reducing size a little bit to get some more space on Larkin and to that southwest property line. But we're, or at least I'm certainly open to a creative solution that is able to do it. So if
Sure.
you're able to find one, we're all ears.
Have you reached out to any of the landowners that have bought the property?
No, and we don't have ownership of it yet. We are scheduled to close on the land this summer. So we haven't done any outreach to any other neighbors. The Schutte family, one of the members lives adjacent to the parcel, and I've met with him and ridden out to the house and looked at the barn and the rest of it. But and I know a few people in the business community next door as well, but kind of kept it hush hush really just until we get to certain points where we've gotten your feedback and everything else before we start talking to too many people about it.
I understand.
Yeah.
I think from my perspective, it would be easier for me to accept something less than the full setback on Larkin if the people who would be impacted don't see it as a major negative. So if there's things that you can do that satisfy their needs, that makes it a lot easier for me to see it as acceptable.
Sure, understand. Appreciate that.
Anything else you need from us?
No, I think I'm good. I just want to make sure that we had addressed things. I guess maybe the only other thing I would mention were the new road that would come in. I think that there was comments about the 60-foot easement, and the reason we had designed it as such was that it was a minor arterial street or a minor street definition under the city comp plan. So under that particular definition, we thought this was a less traveled road for sure, just for the businesses, that it would be that the setback for that road is a 60-foot easement. I'm sorry. Be a 60-foot easement. So that's why we designed it that way. So I guess just to bring up that point so that maybe something we can look into further, but that's the rationale. And then as related to the parking setbacks, we would definitely landscape those as much as we possibly could as well, just to try to do things right. And then that it would all be uniform. What's on Larkin is the same as that's on New Road. So we try to also just design it such that it would be or uniformity. So those are my last comments.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good work. It's a lot of work.
Did you guys comment?
Quick comment on that. I think you're trying to put an elephant into a phone booth, but with the setback being tight on Larkin, one thing you guys did not address at all is the road. Is the road?
I addressed it with the,
And not only that, but you add this new street and everything else, you may be putting in truck lanes and stuff, which takes more of your setback.
I addressed all of that in the study.
We'll
I'm
figure that out
sorry.
when the study. No,
This is the beginning of a process.
there's
And
a
again,
lot more info that we need before we'll know that stuff, but thank you for bringing it up. 8C, which is another sketch plan, PUD sketch plan for Highway 55 Business Park.
Yes, this one will look familiar. It used to have a new name, a different name. It was the Highway 55 Business Park, and now it's the Pioneer Trail Industrial Park, but it's the same project.
Interesting.
Same team. You saw this in November, and at the time, the applicant thought they could do the development under the I-1 standard. And as we've worked with them, it's become clear that that is not possible. It will need to be a PUD, and like the last application, will require flexibility. And so we thought it was important to bring it back to you, given all the conversation about what warrants a PUD and what you're willing to give flexibility for and what you want in return. So if you go to the next slide. At the time it came in, we talked about a variance to allow it to proceed without sewer and water. They'll still need that variance, but you can do it as part of your PUD flexibility now. But since we've been working with them on the plan, they've realized that a PUD is required for building and parking setback requirements from Highway 55. That has a table in the staff report. I'm not going to go through this, but page 2 outlines all of those specific standards because there's a lot of flexibility in there. And then parking standards from the new public street for all of the lots. And a request for flexibility from the building material standards for the mini storage, self-storage building on lot 5. Next slide. The questions, and I know you like shorter presentations, so it's all in my staff report, but the same question as the last time is, are you okay with the flexibility requested? Is there something in particular that you would like in exchange for that if it comes in as a PUD? So that the applicant can be sure that they're working towards that. Because of the November work, we have already started the EAW, and you will see that at your March 24th meeting. So we're already kind of down the road, but in light of the recent changes to the plan that result in the need for the PUD, we wanted to bring it back to you for review and comment one more time. And the applicant's team is here tonight as well.
Thank you. Any questions that stood out, or anyone want to start with their thoughts?
I have a question about the material on the building. So is the material they're requesting to use, it's similar to the other building off 19?
No, where is Paul?
Some of both.
Yeah,
No,
great.
I think we've got tilt up on the face on 19, don't we, Paul?
What's that?
I think we've got tilt up on the face of
We
19.
do. What we're running into is supply chain issues.
No.
So what we did is we went back and we called Jorgensen with Park Place Storage. We went back and tried to design in using the products that we know, the Mega Rib and the Azteco panels. You see those a lot now in retail establishments. You see them in offices. You see them in different areas on higher end finishes because they're stable. They go a long time. We can't get that Fabcon, that same one. It's out too far for us. The bigger industrials are sopping all that up, and we just can't get it. We looked at, in the ordinance, we looked at lap siding, we looked at some faux materials there in the ordinance. The problem is the look, right? We want that look that looks to fit with the rest of it, but we don't want lap siding. We don't want to have it look like that there. We tried to do more with landscaping, color schemes, different products, different wall dimensions, pulling it in, pulling it out. We would do, I didn't get the rendering. Do we have that rendering?
This one?
Yeah, so I didn't get more windows in there. We can double up the windows, bring more of those in. And do some things more with the elevation changes in the building, rather than saying, you're not gonna see those doors, that's gonna be screened all from there. So I think we can make it look better than we could with the approved materials with these, so. Kind of a gray on gray, we kind of changed up a little color scheme that we liked it better.
But from a distance, it'll look more like a concrete.
We have people that come up to them, and we had the whole team out, the planning commission to Wisconsin, and they're like, well, how do you get concrete to tip up like this? Or, and they do it, obviously, like concrete tip ups, that's what they are. But ours were steel. They were standing right next to them and they thought they were all concrete. Now, we obviously know it, but when you're viewing those, I mean, I look at that and go, that's what we were shooting for. That's what we wanted. Rather than using, lap siding. No offense to lap siding, but that's not the what we're looking for, I guess. So.
Yeah, on review of the building materials, it looked to me like stucco. And I thought this was better than many of the things that we have in the ordinance, like the decorative concrete block. I have no problem personally with treating this like it's stucco, even though it's made of metal based on the look. Personally, I don't know how the rest of the council feels. But. Can you pass the sample? Is that
Yeah,
what you're
That'd
looking
be
at?
great, actually.
I think the staff report said that this material was requested for Nelson, but we
Correct.
chose not to
Council
use.
denied it. They
Do you
felt
know-
that it did not meet the same quality.
Okay.
What did we end up going with on that?
Tilt up concrete.
There's a thermal break there.
I think the concerns that were discussed from the building department staff is the durability issue. You bang into a piece of concrete, it still looks like concrete. You bang into this and you're exposing insulation.
But also on the exterior, you're not banging into it at all. Right, like along those areas, they're not, that's the visual area. That will be just as good as the day it's ever put on because you don't have anything in it.
Yeah, that's the other part. So our code requires all four sides to be the same and I thought you were still using this internal. Are you not using that on the
Yeah, so
inside?
it'd be everywhere.
Yeah.
That would be everywhere with the mega rib is up
It's just
above.
the blue, yeah.
Yeah, and that's basically just to give it some visual snap to it, You panel it with all that, and then you come along with the mega rib just to give it a little relief here and there.
And Paul, if the panel gets changed, you can't replace that.
Yeah, that's the good part. Now, they're all storage condominiums, so that the exterior gets nothing, there's nothing there. It's, trees and shrubs and nobody goes by that, so.
Do any of your other condos have this product that the council could go look at?
Well, yeah, Cottage Grove.
Cottage Grove is using this material.
Yeah, that's pretty standard. That's being used a lot now. I mean, it's more and more. The mega ribs used, you see that around too. I want to say like Best Buy has some of that. I'm not sure where else. More decorative. Trying to think where else they have it.
Just written down.
That was my only real question, but you said a panel can be replaced. So there's structure behind this panel on the inside of the building then
Yeah,
too.
right.
That's,
The great thing about these is they're super energy efficient too. You can have a blizzard on the outside, have your hand on the inside, you can't feel it. It's that good. So.
okay.
I think I'd potentially be open to it. I would think it'd be less, kind of what you were saying, less potential impacts to the building on a site like this versus Nelson. Just given the nature of what each does and how the site's situated.
Yeah,
The wear and tear.
the interior where the garage space are is going to see the most
Yeah.
damage, if any.
Yep.
And so I guess what protects that? Do you have like pylons and the door corners? So
We, for the most part, don't, we're building in like on all the new stuff, like a wainscot. So something hits it, boom, 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 it's off, it's on. So
Okay.
like you take,
Sorry. You want that back up?
so you can flip that,
Frozen.
basically it'd just be a wainscot, not on the outside, because you won't need it out there. On your visual that you see, you won't need it out there. But we built in a wainscot so that, like, between doors, we don't like bollards, pipes.
Yeah.
Because they'll sit out there, then it doesn't get snow removal. You know, you're another 2 feet out for snow removal, and then someone has a slip and fall. So ours is, we like to get close enough, and then have that piece reproducible. So basically 4 screws, you put the new one on. So that if somebody were to bang into it, you've got something reproducible quickly. So,
Does the association maintain that?
yeah, everything outside is the association, which is us. We manage it. We managed the ones in Corcoran there for 23 years. So I sold them originally. I was skinny when we started. So, but yeah.
Which location are you talking about? Is it the one over on 19?
Yeah. So we started that in 99 and.
Okay.
Yeah, what was that, 30? So, and a good run. We appreciate Corcoran. Everybody's been great here. We've had a good relationship. I think our customers enjoy it. They, obviously we've built over time, year on year, and it's been good. So.
I think we're open to the.
On the material, yeah.
Yep.
I think that was the main thing for you, unless you had anything else that you'd like us to. Then back to the site in general. Do we have the slide of what some of the main asks were? Yeah. So in terms of building and parking setback from 55, I think, what's the requirement?
So Highway 55 has a 100-foot building setback, but you can reduce it to the building setback to 60 with extra landscaping.
Mhm.
The parking has a 100-foot setback from Highway 55, but that can be reduced to 50 feet with the additional landscaping.
Gotcha.
And they are not wanting to do the additional landscaping because the buildings on lot 1 where the flexibility is required could meet that with the landscaping, but they want the visibility from Highway 55. So they've got reduced setbacks along Highway 55, roughly 25 feet. It varies a little bit where 100 feet is required. And then the same along Street A, it's a 50-foot setback, or the sort of the same as the previous applicant, 20-foot setback along the south side of the street, and then Park Place Storage would be a 36-foot setback on the north side of the street.
Gotcha. And just in theory, I like the concept of some flexibility along 55 in that it's bringing a lot of this further away from the residential areas. Whether or not, I guess that gets to the level of what's the setback that's being proposed off 55 here?
25 parking generally.
Gotcha.
And lot 1, a 65-foot building setback. The other buildings do meet the required 100-foot setback from Highway 55. So it's just
Gotcha.
parking.
Yeah, what are your guys' thoughts on that?
The last time we talked, the neighbors to the north were all appeased. Everything was good. My only concern is just that Pioneer Trail intersection in Highway 55.
Mhm.
Again, I'm assuming the studies will expose that if it needs to be signaled or anything per the state and those kind of things. Otherwise, I'm not concerned about much
Yeah, I think
myself.
I think if it, we'll know once we have those numbers back, but if it does trigger a signal, I think that, yeah, a win-win there.
I just did, in my mind, from just beyond Pioneer all the way to Rolling Hills.
Mhm.
That whole area concerns me a lot.
Yep.
But again, it's a state highway. Not much we can do about it or say about it.
But yeah, this
Nervous.
this might be something that puts it over that
Yep.
threshold. So
Yep.
I think it might be. Yeah, so I think
I think as far as setbacks from 55, I'm okay under PUD flexibility negotiating for that. I want to make sure that we're being careful on the neighbors to the north, that those setbacks are still satisfied on the screening requirements for parking, and the loading docks would be satisfied. I wouldn't be very open to
Yep.
flexing on those, but to the south, I'm okay.
And maybe if we're giving significant flexibility to 55 without the additional screening, maybe we'd like to see that northern property line particularly buffered with the screening.
Yeah.
And same to some extent to the west from the northern buildings, although it's not as close. But you kind of mentioned the loading areas, and that brings up the issue. And I think this was in the staff report of building 3, which kind of seems like it's difficult to screen the loading area. And I don't know what the best solution for that is. I was throwing out a few different random ideas yesterday, and I don't know if it potentially could be reconfigured, or you could flip that building 90 degrees and have loading area facing building 4 as opposed to just open to pretty much all of the residential there. It might create its own set of problems, but
Well, could you screen between the north side of the street and the stormwater pond? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, it looks like there's room up there. I mean, I think there's a little bit of landscaping that could happen between the street and the loading dock, but there's not enough room to really, again, like the last one, you can't burn, you can't do anything like that, but you can add some trees, perhaps some heavier landscaping on that near that stormwater pond would be a possibility.
Good suggestion.
Do you have the map, the site map that it shows? Oh, can you walk through there's numbers down there. Can you just walk through the numbers so I understand? So there's a bottom black line that shows 50 foot, and then there's, like on building 3, there's a red line around it that shows 25 or 27 feet from the red line to the parking. Is that where we're talking? The 50 foot doesn't change anywhere?
No, that 50 foot is actually based on the last time we had a project on this site, MnDOT asked for a 50 foot right of way.
Okay,
That's a MnDOT right of way. If they didn't take that for some reason, like they did in 2004, that would certainly give more room.
okay. So their setback starts at the end of the right of way.
Yes, so that on building 3, that 27, that red line that the 27 is measuring from is the new property line. But the current property line is 50 feet south of that. And it would be that right of way would be dedicated.
Did we have to deal with any setbacks when we rebuilt the car dealership?
Well, we did, but they, their parking lot was there and their building was so far back, they met the setback.
Okay. So their parking lot probably already encroached within the setback.
Their parking lot's in MnDOT right of way.
Oh, okay. Well, that's probably why we required them to move their cars at night.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, I guess I'm fine with some of the flexibility on it being right on 55. I understand the reason why they want to have good sight lines to those businesses from the highway.
Yep.
I may have an issue in the future if a convenience store comes in on that corner.
what's that?
A gas station convenience store on Pioneer Trail. But this is only a concept to show what might be there, so.
Right.
I share that reservation.
Yeah, I'm there too. I can see all of our septic signs and everything. Where is the water supply from?
Well-
Am I missing that? Where is the well? Where is
So each, as proposed.
each building?
Site will have their own septic system and their own well. One of the comments in the engineer's memo is encouraging the applicant to consider a shared well for fire. I think specifically for fire, Kevin, is that right? Trying to find it.
There may be some benefits, you know, more of an idea for them to look at or evaluate. There may be some benefits fire related and potentially it could be a future municipal well or some conversation could be had related to that. Ideas at this point.
You said each site have its own septic. The 6 buildings on the northwest corner, there's no septic or anything identified north of Street A.
They're all storage.
Yeah, I understand that. I just,
Well, the applicant's still here, but our code does not allow people to live there or run a business
Okay.
out of there.
don't need to worry about those.
Well, I mean, I think it's a fair question. I think what Paul has said is he will not be having septic for this complex. But it probably is a fair question to ask him.
But didn't you have something in your narrative about an RV wash?
Yeah, so what we normally do is just put like down in the other ones on 19.
Yeah.
There, we put in tanks because we use them so little that it goes into a tank and gets pumped.
Okay.
So then what we did is we designed it so that when you bring sewer and water, we hook up to it. So like the one, say the one down on 19, it sets up similarly that pipe gets brought in here. Now, maybe the engineer looks at it, it'd be better over here. But then when you bring city services in, then we just hook that pipe up so that we're ready. We want city service, but up to that point, we use such little water. Now, the fire suppression, we put in our own tanks. So we have 30,000 gallons of water. And then we have a forced main in our property that gets serviced and it goes out to the buildings. Same thing here. That would be a dry system. And then basically the engineers formulate how that works. I'm not the guy for that, but then that pipe comes out and then we're ready. Like as soon as that pipe comes by that road, we can hook up to both water and sewer. So it's been a great system. It's a dry system, so we don't have water in the pipe. Like our customer might leave a garage door open, you know, like the garage door malfunctions or something when it's 20 below. Hasn't happened yet out there, but we put in a dry system so that if the door stays up, it wouldn't freeze anything. You know, we don't get a call out and that kind of thing. So but been a real good system.
So again, my concern is these are big buildings and such, you don't have any biffies or anything,
Well, so
those kind of things.
We
What,
would run it into a tank there, and then that tank would have, you'd have bathrooms in the units, like we have bathrooms in the ones in Trista for Corcoran.
okay,
It's just they don't get used, you know, like you.
they're still there. I don't want anybody using the outside of the buildings.
Yeah.
None of those things. You are very, very proud of your buildings and your properties and those kind of things. I'm just asking those questions.
Yeah, so basically it would go into a tank and then get pumped, just like the ones.
Understood.
up toward,
Thank you.
Anything else on this one?
It's the staff.
Yeah.
I did not hear any real direction about any benefit that you're looking for, or specifically council consensus on something you want us to be working with them on. I think I heard generally support for the flexibility, but I want to make sure we bring you back what you expect.
I would say the same things as on the last one. So upgraded exteriors, I would see as a benefit, especially where it faces a residential area. Better screening and landscaping than is required would be a benefit.
And if we're not doing it on the 55 side, then
Then on the
Elsewhere.
opposite side, it could be
The
really good.
neighbors on the north.
Um, Do we do park dedication for something like this, given the nature of the zoning?
Park dedication is required.
So a higher level of park dedication would be a benefit. And extra screening to the north, I guess, but I already covered that. Anybody else think of any benefits for this area? The stoplight, would that be?
Stop, I mean, we'll know if that gets triggered or not, but yeah, if it does, that would be a huge benefit of this happening in general.
Do you know, is there any changes to water flow off this site? And the reason I ask is I was contacted by someone from Medina on the south side of the road that told me there's some natural flow under 55 to the south. Will that still be maintained?
Yes, that's the plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Go into the porch for.
No, there's some water, wetland
Yeah.
area down here, and I think there's a creek or something.
Sounds good.
Great, they'll be back in front of you on the 24th.
Oh, wow.
next month.
Sounds good. Perfect. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, guys.
We'll go on to 8D, which is, oh yeah. 8D, which is final plat and final PUD for Bellwether 7th.
Yes, this is the former Schober property. It's on the south side of Steed Road. It's a 17 lot subdivision. Next slide. I have the history of the project. This was a little bit different. And so I wanted to just, this parcel was platted as part of the original Bellwether in 2018. It was platted as a single lot because Schobers were not ready to leave their home at that time. But it was ghost platted to show the subdivision you have in front of you. And then that subdivision with the 17 lots was approved as an official plat, a re-subdivision of the existing Bellwether lot into 17 lots in July of last year. Next slide. So this is the PUD plan this evening. Again, more of the same Bellwether lots, expansion of the existing pond that's on the south side of Steeg Road. Next slide. Next slide. This was the 2018 approval, just for context. The stars where we're talking about right now, it was platted as lot 4. Slide. This was the preliminary plat that you reviewed in July of last year. And those red dots that you see are where the 17th is. That's on the right are where we're at. It gets a little kind of hard to track sometimes where we are in the project. Thanks, Jess. Next slide. This is the final plat for the 17 lots, and final slide, I believe, is the phasing plan. The green area on the upper right is the 7th edition that you're looking at tonight. Just as a heads up, we have also received the 8th down there and 9th edition and 2nd edition of Amberley. So basically, within this spring, all of the phases will be coming in front of you with the exception of the very southwest corner, which is phase 10. So I don't know what's happening, but it's really phases are coming in fast and furious.
Will those be preliminary or final?
Those are all final.
Okay.
Next slide is we do recommend approval of resolution 2210, approving the final PUD plan, and 2211, approving the final plat. The PUD plan was reviewed by the Planning Commission on the 3rd and voted unanimously to recommend approval.
Thank you, Kendra. Any
And the
questions?
applicant is online, I believe, still.
Perfect. Any questions for either Kendra or the applicant?
I just had a comment for Kendra.
Go for it.
Your first slide reference to Vera.
Did it?
Yes.
Sorry about
I didn't
that.
catch that. Nice.
I wasn't gonna say anything. but
I'm not that kind of guy.
Is it the 7th or-
No.
Otherwise, it was a
it
good
was the
presentation.
Let's go back to that page quick. Let's just review.
I said fast and furious, and it has
That's
been. It's
true.
been correct.
That is true. Any other questions for Kendra? It's all pretty straightforward. No surprises. We're all good. I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution 2022-10, approving the final PUD development plan and resolution 2022-11, approving the final plat and development contract.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And we are on. We want to power through. Do we want to take a 5-minute break? What are we thinking?
Let's do a 5-minute break.
Okay. 5-minute recess. Be back at 6-minute recess. Be back at.
Would you guys have a bet we were gonna break or we'll power through?
but my word is done.
Perfect.
I get to sneak home and see my hubby.
We're able to see the people on Zoom.
Call the meeting back to order. And we are on to 9 unfinished business. We have another public comment opportunity for just 9A, which is the 2022A bond issuance.
Mayor and Council, we haven't received any comment cards in person here, but anyone joining us virtually can press *9 or click reactions and raise your hand. At this time, we don't have anyone not raising
We'll
a hand.
go right into the presentation.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Mayor and Council. We do have tonight with us Tammy Amdahl, who is from Northland Securities. She's been with the council or worked with the city for many years and put together the bond issuance in the packet. And I'll let Tammy do a brief discussion of what we're looking at for bonds. And then we'd be looking at approving resolution 2214.
Mayor, City Council, Tammy Amdahl, Northland Securities. For some of you, I am a new face. I have worked with the city since 2011. I worked on the setting up of the initial utility funds with the city and the financing of some, which we're going to talk about refunding those funds, as well as the city's long-term financial management plan. And working on that since 2011, as well as bond issuance. So tonight, I'm here to talk about preparing and calling for the issuance of the 2020 bonds. There's 2 purposes to this approximate 4.1 million of bonds to be issued. The majority of it, 2.3 million, is to refund existing debt, the 2014 bonds that were issued and pledged with revenue from the water and sewer fund for purposes of the interest savings. And I know that staff, I think at a work session, spoke to you about this. Currently, the estimated savings, and certainly today was an interesting day in the markets, but in your finance plan, estimated at about 120,000 or just over 4% on a present value basis. We will continue to monitor that as we get closer to the end of April, the second meeting sale date. If that savings holds at that 3% or above threshold, to recommend to continue it. The way this is set up, that there is the option to pull that with staff if it just does not make financial sense at the time. I would note there is still some benefit if that savings would even drop below that 3%, because by combining it with the new money issuance for the equipment, the cost of issuance that is really fixed gets spread over more bonds. So there is some benefit of that. So that's 2.3 of the 4.1. The other portion, about 1.8 million, is for the equipment certificates. If you had a chance to look in your packet, you will note that those specific types of equipment, those bonds are spread over 5, 7, or 10 years, depending on the useful life of the equipment. The city has traditionally issued equipment certificate bonds about every other year. I know that the city's been working to try to get that annual levy up in order to minimize the future issuance of bonds for equipment, but certainly that's a major pieces. With respect to the security, as I mentioned, of the refunding bonds, the 2014, the pledge is revenue from utilities. That will not change. That was the original pledge. The equipment will be tax levy. The plan for that tax levy is in your long-term plan and anticipating the issuance of these bonds. And the city, as the council is well aware, is also planning to use some cash, both from sale of existing assets as well as cash that is in the equipment fund. So the bonds are used for that amount. With respect to the estimated rate, when the interest finance plan 2 weeks ago, we were at 2.35% estimated true interest cost. That's the basis upon which these will be a competitive sale. This, that's the basis upon which the bids will be evaluated. Because the city has a reasonable expectation that you will issue more than 10 million in bonds in this calendar year, these bonds, these 2028 bonds, have to be issued as something called non-bid qualified. That means that the rate that you will obtain from underwriters that will bid will be a little bit higher than it would be if you were going to be under 10 million for the calendar year. You might say, well, what does that mean? It's about, in the current market, about 0.05% difference. So not significant. That could change. Certainly the market is changing. So by the time that you're issuing the second 2020 for water, that spread may be higher, but we just don't know at this point. And here, we're not talking about the 2022B, we're talking the 2022A, and that spread is not that significant right now. I would also note that we are recommending that the city go up for rating on these bonds. The size is large enough. This will be a competitive sale. The city has a very strong rating, AA3, so 3 notches down from the highest rating, AAA. I have seen nothing in the city's financial performance that would cause me any concern with that. Northland, myself, will work with your staff as we have in the past to get ready for that call and make sure that they're well prepared to answer any of the questions that the rating analysts will have. Really with that, wrapping up again, proposals will be received the morning of April 28th. I will be back at your meeting that evening for you to consider the award. Most likely it will include the refunding, but there is the option to work with your staff to pull that if it does not make financial sense. So Mayor, City Council, happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Any questions for Tim?
Not for me at this time. Thank you.
Well delivered, Tammy. Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
what you do for us.
Thank you. We'll see you in April.
Sounds good.
Excellent.
Actually, I won't be there, but these guys can handle it.
Sounds great.
One time I'm out.
Thanks.
All righty. So yeah, any discussion on this before the motion? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution 2022-14, providing for the issuance and sale of approximately 4.13 million general obligation bonds, series 2022A.
So move.
Second,
You can have this one.
thanks.
Dean on the second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Finally, finally, new business. We have a public comment opportunity for items 10A through F. That's the Planning Commission and Parks and Trails appointments, virtual purchasing and bidding policy, municipal well number 1, plans and authorized bids, crew leader appointment, and liquor license amendment and noise waiver.
Anyone joining us virtually can press *9 if you're on a phone. Otherwise, you can press reactions and raise your hand. Mayor, at this time, no one's raising their hand.
Okay, then we'll go right into 10A.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor and Council. We do have in front of us Planning Commission Dean Jacobs and Corinne Bremen. Both were interested in continuing their service on the Planning Commission, and we ask that Council consider reappointment for these two individuals.
Easy enough.
I'll make a motion to approve the appointment of Dean Jacobs and Corinne Drummond.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
10B, Parks and Trails.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. For the Parks and Trails Commission, we did have 3 terms that were set to expire at the end of the month here. One of the 3 members was seeking reappointment. We did notice the vacancy for the 2 positions on the Parks and Trails Commission. We did receive 1 application from Michelle Friedrich. The subcommittee of Dean Berenkamp and Mayor McKee reviewed the application and
Counselor.
recommended appointment.
Commissioner Anderson too.
Oh, and Commissioner Anderson as well. Sorry, all 3 of them reviewed the applications. Sorry about that. But then we'll continue to go out for applications and seek applications for that one remaining vacancy. But we do ask that we appoint current Commissioner Tom Anderson for reappointment and Michelle Friedrich for appointment for a 3-year term for the Planning Parks and Trails Commission.
So moved.
Can I ask a
I
question?
feel like everyone looked at me like they had something. Go for it.
I just want to make sure she didn't feel like we dished her, that we didn't interview or do
Nope,
anything
I
for
give,
this.
I give her a
Okay.
call on over the
We
weekend.
talked
We
about that.
chatted about it.
Okay.
So the commission members were yourself, Dean, and Tom. Tom, how did you rate yourself?
We didn't go into
No,
that one.
we didn't do.
Oh,
the-
okay.
That's for
the
reappointment.
Oh,
Just
okay.
reappointed
The
Tom.
new- the
Okay.
new,
I think he's credible enough. so.
Yeah.
I may
I
make a
guess
motion
kind
to
of
accept.
dedicated to parks and
Two.
trails.
Thank you.
Someone want to make a motion on it?
I already did.
Oh, you
Oh, you
did? I'm
did?
sorry, I
I'll
missed
second it
that.
then.
Second,
Perfect.
one of us will second.
Any discussion?
Thank you
All
for
the-
all you do, Tom.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And thank you for what you're about to do,
Yeah.
Michelle.
Welcome aboard to something else. All right, 10C, which is on this page, virtual purchasing and bidding policy.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor and Council. We put in front of you, we prepared some amendments to our financial guidelines, and Maggie might want to talk to this.
So I reviewed the financial guidelines, and what we were originally looking at was amending the bidding policy, or putting in place a bidding policy to so that people can submit electronic bidding, which was not in our guidelines before. And then as I was reviewing, the bidding policy was embedded in the purchase of goods and services guideline. So I pulled that bidding policy portion out and made it its own policy. And then as well as reviewed the purchasing guidelines and then made it into a policy. So some of the stuff that were being updated was the splitting of the two different sections, as well as updating the definition of emergency purchasing. And then putting in wording for the electronic portion of bidding.
Perfect, thank you. Any questions for Maggie?
Yeah, I have one question.
Go for
So I noticed we changed the threshold for purchases from 100,000 to 175,000.
That was a state law change.
Yeah,
That's
state law.
really, it was us keeping up with state statute. In the past, we had referenced state statute, but we also referenced the $100,000 mark in that change just to inflation and the
Okay.
Mhm.
State statute 471, 345.
Okay, that was my only question.
Anything else? No. Want to make a motion to approve resolution 2022-13, adopting the purchasing and bidding policy.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. 10D, municipal well number 1, accept plans and authorize bids.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before you is another kind of methodical step in our water supply system process. The original approvals to start this design was in the pre-design package about 6 to 9 months ago. I'm losing track of the dates, but so that was previously authorized. So tonight we're just accepting the plans and authorizing the bidding, in addition to a proposal that takes care of the construction management portion of the work that would be upcoming. On the screen is the latest and greatest site plan. We will be going through this in more detail at the work session on March 10th. And likely we'll have some updates on the water tower site on March 10th. So you'll see more and more of this as we dial in the final and move towards final design. But I just want to note that it is advantageous, and this was part of the original plan, to pursue the municipal well installation slightly ahead of the final design for the treatment plant. Because if we know the actual capacities and water quality out of the larger production well, we can refine our designs and our pump sizes, and so we avoid change orders and other supply issues. So this was always part of our plan. And on the screen there, on the kind of the northwest part of the parcel, it's where the production well will go, kind of on the eastern edge. A third of the way from the top is where our existing monitoring well was. That was test well number 1. And that will be retained and used as a sampling monitoring well. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. What we ask of you tonight is to consider a motion to accept the plans and authorize bids for municipal well number 1 and the associated engineering services proposal from Stantec as outlined in the report.
Questions for Kevin?
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Of course.
I got turned around. I thought all of the expansion cells for the water treatment was gonna go from west to east. This shows south to north. I'm trying to figure out how I got turned around.
There's kind of 2 parts to that expansion. The capacity of the current treatment is going from, is what you've seen on here.
Okay,
The east-west portion would be if we added on, say, a softening component.
there, that was
That's
it.
set up
Thank
to
you.
go, that's kind of the setbacks in the property that would flop over, whenever that came on board, and that's dictated by agencies and need. So
So the technical
we-
term,
what's that?
so the technical term to flop over.
Oh,
Wow.
I like it.
do better than that. But I mean, again, the site is the number 1 focus is flexibility, adaptability. We know that we're gonna have some challenges guessing exactly what's right. We're really trying to find that sweet spot and maintain flexibility. So that's what you're seeing here. This is the capacity.
Yep, no, I'm okay. I think one of the drawings might have been north-south, was actually right to left on the drawing and stuff, so. Oh, I'm okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I'm okay with the proposal. Quick question, it's hard to describe, but the textured area between the north-south driveway and the building that kind of comes down in an L, what is that trying to show? Is
I think
that like,
that's showing concrete sidewalk.
very good, thank you.
And again, more conversation about this is to come. We just wanted to kind of give you a sense of what's happening. So some context.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor,
Yeah, go ahead.
where are we at as far as the moratorium timeline and our plans? Is everything aligning? Are we okay with that moratorium is up in June?
It is up in June, and I think we're working as quickly as we can to move forward this very complicated
Yep.
water system project. So as quickly as we can, we're trying to move forward and get some feedback from you all, and being able to spend time at work sessions like we are next week is really
Okay.
helpful to keep us on track.
Cool.
Yeah, I would say they'll present the schedule. Would say we're within a couple months, which I think is pretty good considering what we're undertaking. So we're being mindful. We're coming back to you every month here with something, so we're just taking it step by step. So I think
You're comfortable, we're going well.
yeah, I think
Things are going
we're
well.
not going. I mean, we're not rapidly firing this off, but we're also not, just sitting on it. So there's actively people working on this every hour of the day. We've invested a lot into this today, and it's ongoing, and a lot of that stuff will roll up here in the next 2 months. Where then we'll finalize some preliminary designs, and we'll ask you to advance if you're so interested, and some updates on the tower site are forthcoming here at the next meeting.
Great.
Cool.
Anything else? I'll go ahead and make the motion to accept the plans and authorize bids for the municipal well number 1 improvement project and associated engineering services proposal to Stantec in the amount of $28,800.
So move.
Pick someone from that.
Second, whatever.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. 10E, crew leader appointment and maintenance worker recruitment.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. In front of you on the dais was a revised item. We did hold interviews on Thursday of last week. And we are recommending moving forward with an internal candidate, Mark Franking. And that being said, Mark's been with the city since 2019 and has a lot of experience prior to working for the city, a 30-year career before this. So has a lot of experience on the team, and we're excited to have him be in this new position. And Kevin might be able to talk about it a bit more, but we'd be asking council today to move forward with approving the offer letter and authorizing staff. The next step with moving Mark to crew leader would be to ask to move forward with a recruitment process to move on board that next public works maintenance worker, as we outlined in the overall public works staffing plan that we started last year in 2021.
Sounds good.
I would just like to add that we had multiple candidates. We have great staff. It's always a difficult decision when you have to select one, but we're excited for Mark and the opportunity that he has. And we look forward to other opportunities for other staff. So I just want everyone to know that we have great staff here that we're excited about to develop and have them have opportunities to expand their careers. So.
And there certainly should be more opportunities in the future with, how we're growing and different things that we're gonna have to figure out how to do as we grow, like the water system and all that. Okay, any questions for Kevin on that? Or are we all good?
Make a motion to approve.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Sure.
Yep. And that was for the entirety of the
Yep.
offer letter. And to begin recruitment.
Yep.
And we had a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and then finally, 10F, liquor license amendment and noise waiver.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We received a request from the stanchion to host an event within the city of Corcoran. They're looking at hosting it in conjunction with the Hamel Rodeo this year, which would be the July 8th and July 9th. The rodeo runs from the 7th to the 10th, but the evenings that they're looking at are July 8th and 9th. They're requesting a liquor license, a temporary expansion of their liquor license area, which would include a tent and a fenced in area. And in the past, we've approved a few different events at this location, as long as there was fencing, security, and additional insurance. And those items have been discussed with the applicant, and those would be conditions of approval. The second portion that they're looking at, besides the liquor license amendment, would be the noise waiver. They are asking for amplified noise outside for bands on the 8th and 9th from, that says 9 a.m., but it's actually 9 p.m. Sorry about that. From 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. Is what their request is. Just so council is aware that we have allowed for amplified noise for events like country days, as well as tractor pulls and things like that till 12 a.m. So this request is outside of what we've seen in the past, but certainly within the purview of the council to make the determination on what that noise waiver looks like. So really in front of us today, it's just for council to consider the request. I have put up a potential, now that we have a time line, I have put up a potential language that we could use for a motion. Just with some feedback on what you'd like to see that noise waiver, if you'd like to see a noise waiver, what that could be.
Sounds good.
And Matt is here if you have any specific public safety concerns. or questions.
One question I had is how amplified is amplified? Because I know for country days, I could hear it inside my house a mile away. I don't know if this is going to be at that level or is this?
That was
I would assume
intended.
not.
Everything was directed towards you. Tom.
So I've talked with the establishment owner, Christy Monans, just to really kind of see, are we on the same page with what her intentions are? And, you know, what were we looking at from a public safety standpoint? She is looking at a full band setup from, you know, they are professional performers. So, and I don't want to spill, you know, publicly, I want that, you know, her message if she goes forward with it. So I don't want to tip that too much, but they are legitimate, you know, at least Midwestern acts, or in their, it's bigger than a garage band and probably smaller than a country days setup, and significantly that helps.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
in the staff summary and such, it says 1 or 1:30 a.m. What does she want?
Initially, we did not have that information. The revised information that she sent in an email is 1 a.m.
Shut down, okay. Is there a reason we can't give her a buffer to 1:30 or just
So
cut it off at 1?
we could certainly, we have the discretion here. The council has a lot of discretion here. Currently, our ordinance really outlines the construction activities after 10 is generally the cutoff is 10 p.m. Generally, but
Yeah.
we have seen many of our events, or all of our events that are currently approved are only until 12 a.m.
Okay,
So this would be an hour later.
that's enough. All right.
And,
Thank
and
you.
the difference, you know, we get a fair amount of complaints for events like, you know, when the country days band stuff are playing. Typically it's from Maple Grove residents, and they've worked with setup down there. They've learned over time which way to point the stage and how we can mitigate that as much as possible. But
Keep it pointing the same way this year, just
we get
for Jeremy's sake.
we get more than a handful of calls on the weekend. So it does generate some quality of life concerns for people. And it's usually, you know, I'm trying to put my kids to bed, or, you know, I mean, they're real factors. And I think it's really trying to weigh how often does the city allow this, which is kind of really how we came back around to, if there's going to be exemptions, that they come from the council at a policy level to decide what meets our threshold for what we're going to allow, how frequent, how often, how late. Again, the 1 or 1:30 would be a deviation from what we've allowed in the past. Typically, we've gone until midnight, which some people felt was far too late. Other people said we should be able to go longer. So there is kind of a fairness aspect, because there's a needle to thread here, because I believe that she's probably trying to compete with, for instance, In Cahoots or other entertainment options that are happening that night that are going until 1 a.m. The other side of that coin is, how does that impact quality of life? And from a fairness standpoint, when other establishments come to the city, as have talked about doing similar, and it hasn't materialized lately, you know, there were some good parties back in the day, as probably many of you remember, that used to happen frequently. That's tapered off, and it's starting to come back a little bit more now. But out of fairness, you know, if there's factors that lead to the deviation, maybe the council would like to articulate this is or isn't different, or, you know, recognizing it could be precedent setting for other establishments that might have a similar or same request.
We're gonna have a new neighborhood straight north, so to speak, out of the parking lot and such by this year. That timeline, how many occupant
I don't think too many right now.
homes are gonna be there by
So
July?
I'm not sure how many will be occupied yet. We've had a lot of
Yeah,
permits issued, but I would say there'd be could be several people, but
But
not,
for 3 years, it'd be a
but not for
factor.
a few, probably not
Are we-
fully impacted yet.
are we able to prepare that developer to let their neighbors know that there's gonna be a pretty good party at the stanchion?
I would say that we probably put that responsibility on the people throwing the party, I guess would be my inclination.
Yeah, I think
throwing
that
out-
could be something we can make Christie at the stanchion aware of, that would be something that we'd like to see. If we grant If we grant it.
And I don't,
Discount tickets to them, something.
and I don't know from a feasibility standpoint, from her end, if midnight or 1 o'clock makes or breaks, whether or not it's worth getting those bans. So I'm not going to say that it doesn't matter. There's obviously business impact, and then there's the community impact that we're trying to weigh in on. Typically, when we make these decisions, we have an event packet that we ask of the applicant that outlines, and in that, we also talk about, expectations for the police security, how many number of attendees, contiguous fencing structures, all of that's outlined. This is a long ways in advance, but it's out of necessity because those bands book up.
Yep.
So we're she's trying to understand, she's basically saying, I need to get these bands on the books. If I don't go forward with them, I'm out money. So I want to hear from the council if this is worth doing. On our side, we also somewhat have kind of incomplete information that we typically might not even require until we got closer. So it's a little bit of a unique circumstance.
Is she on by any chance?
Christy is not currently on.
Has she ever hosted outside bands like this before?
She has had 2 other events that I'm aware of. One of them was the Prince event, and then there was one other event last year that she hosted.
I think they were a little bit different in what the scope of what she's expecting. Yeah, she's done outdoor events in the past.
Not in the evening like this?
Not until, I think those ended earlier
Those ended early.
and I don't know if, I wasn't there, so I don't know if those were to the same size as what she's anticipating here or not.
What time does the rodeo itself run until?
They have to waiver till midnight. So.
My understand.
The show usually goes till
Generally-
9:30, 10 o'clock, but then they still got events until whatever.
I'm very comfortable with the extended liquor license. If the amplified sound isn't crazy, I would be okay going longer than 12, but I'm hesitant to set a precedent that other events will try to push so that it becomes a regular thing, especially for the louder ones like Country Days. I guess I'd like to better understand whether that's a deal breaker. I want to support her.
Sure.
I would like to have the people who are coming to the rodeo to have fun, to continue having fun in Corcoran as they can. But I want to acknowledge the surrounding area and not go too overboard.
Yeah, I agree.
I would say we could always, if we approve it as is, we could always, if if this would break the event, she certainly could come back and request till 1 PM at our next meeting.
Request we like amend it.
Yeah, we could amend
Gotcha.
the request if that's.
So maybe that's the safer route to do it till midnight, and then if we have more information and if that's a potential make or break thing, maybe make the decision at that point.
Should we offer the liquor license to one?
I'd
Just not the noise?
be fine with that.
Yeah, can we do that? Liquor license till 1, but noise till midnight? Is that
Works
Yeah,
for me.
I think that we
Viable.
have full discretion over.
unless she
both of
has a
those,
reason to go till 1 o'clock for the noise?
Well, there's 2 elements of the noise. So depending on how many people are out there, there's the human element and then the amplified music element. So there may be, you may want to choose to articulate the amplified music is done by 1 and some accommodation for if there's a crowd of people out there, and that's, at your discretion as to what that is. It might be less intrusive for the people instead of the sound. Maybe that's the right balance.
Yeah. Do we need a time on the temporary liquor license, or is it just by day?
I mean, I think we could do it by day. Generally, it would just be whatever
Although if we're doing it till 1, it's technically
their current
The next day.
hours are, and I'm just trying
9
to think.
10.
Generally, I think their hours are until 1 AM, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So I think that we would just give them for the day, and they can determine if they want to close that section before.
Jessica, do they have a 2 o'clock license?
I'm
And
not
that would
sure
be the-
that they ever renewed that or not.
Because there is a state requirement for the 2 o'clock license, and I don't know if we could grant until 1:30 or not if they don't have a state 2 o'clock license.
I'm gonna pull up
Gotcha.
And the other part of it would be, I think the reason the liquor license amendment is because it's changing their serving premise. Is that
Yes.
correct? That
That is.
typically the
that's
premise is
reason
defined
for it.
as the serving area, which is inside the building.
Yes.
By going external, it's changing their premise, which does have, for instance, I think insurance implications among other things for the event, which is why the amendment for liquor license is required.
Yes, so it looks like on Saturdays, they only go till 1 AM. I do not believe that they've come back for their 2 AM license. I don't recall reissuing that.
So the effect of that is what?
We would be only able to we could allow it for the time that they're allowed to serve liquor, which would
So
be
till
till 1 AM.
Okay. So we could do approving the temporary liquor license on those days till 1 AM. And noise waiver for amplified sound until midnight, and for the human element or whatever would be the best way to describe that till
Yeah,
1.
Noise waiver, or the amplified music until midnight and a noise waiver until 1 AM. And then also the liquor until 1 AM, if that's what your intentions would be.
Does that work?
Yeah, it's fine for me.
And then we'll just use it as a learning moment
Yeah.
for next year.
If she wants to come back and argue for that extra hour,
Right, then we
it
can,
could be related to the signing of bands and
right, yeah,
3
Yeah.
hours of music versus 4. I mean, you should-
right. And there's some time till they, we're earning this pretty far in advance, so she should have the opportunity to if need be. So I'll go ahead and make that motion then to approve the temporary liquor license till 1 AM on those days. And the noise waiver for amplified sound till midnight, and for other sound.
The other sound.
Yeah, till 1 AM.
Not.
I'd second that
Any discussion?
with the open that if she feels she needs more,
Yes,
we can revise.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Good deal. Then we are just, we have anything for active planning application report? Just lot of stuff.
Nothing out of the ordinary to report.
sounds good. Council schedule, Izzy, we got, remember the meeting next week, 5:30 Thursday, correct?
Yes, 5:30 on Thursday. We do have a planning commission meeting a busy planning commission meeting at 7. Just a note that the room will be occupied after that.
I wouldn't think it should take too long.
Can you do me a favor and send me a reminder? Since it's an
We
off.
can try to send you, we'll send you a reminder.
You're talking the March 3rd one.
March 3rd, yeah. For the selecting of.
Prior to planning.
Finalists.
Yeah.
We might, and generally we would send for any meeting the agenda out in advance. So I guess that'd be tomorrow. So we'll send out something.
Yeah, because there's no agenda to
Yeah,
send.
there's
out.
not much of an agenda to send
No.
out, so
Yeah, all the stuff should
we'll
be
send
in
out,
emails.
yep,
Yeah,
Emails, yeah.
we'll send us.
Perfect. Then if there's nothing else.
We just have some busy meetings on the 24th of March, and then just we're looking over the applications that are coming in, and the April meetings might be somewhat busy, and we may end up, depending on how things come in, we may end up pushing things that have a little bit more time to the first meeting in May. As of right now, the worst case scenario would be 9 planning items.
On which day?
And April 28th.
Okay,
So
I feel bad then.
just happened to work out that way. That was the
Okay.
deadline. So just so you know, we do have a couple busy planning meetings coming up for March, April, and even May.
Good to know. Perfect.
is there anything going on with the West Side Tire situation? I don't see that on here at all.
Working on getting their
Yes,
full
they're-
application.
They did get an application in on Friday.
Okay,
I believe we were working through to see if it meant all of if it was actually complete or not. That's why we left it as of earlier this week. So
okay,
it's in process. If possible, that would be one of those items that would be in April that we might end up moving to the May.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. There's nothing else. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All those in